What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video, and today we're talking about my 20 biggest steals of the 2023 NFL Draft. Talking about some guys I think fell way too far and where some teams got some extreme value. We're going to do this in position order, and again, today we're talking about value. Tomorrow we're going to talk about my favorite value pick for all 32 teams, and then we're going to do something similar for the next two videos where it's going to be my top 20 sleepers, which I'll kind of dive more into that different definition and how I'm splitting these up, and then on Thursday, my top 32 favorite fits for all teams, or basically favorite fit for all 32 teams with one of their picks from the NFL Draft. So hopefully you guys are excited. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new, and comment your biggest steals of the 2023 NFL Draft, whether it's from your favorite team or some other team. Let me hear your favorite steal down below. All right, well, we start, and like I said, we're going in position order. So two quarterbacks to talk about. Will Levis, the fact that this guy, to me, was the second best quarterback in this year's class, should have been a top 10 pick. I was saying for a while, I thought 4 quarterbacks should go in the top 10. Levis becomes the odd man out, falls all the way to the second round. This one's simple, and also for Tennessee, it's like you move up 8 spots in the second round, give up negligible trade assets to be able to go get a guy when you just saw the Colts go draft a quarterback in the first round. You saw the Texans draft their potential, franchise quarterback in the future. So you had to make a move, and the fact that they could move up from 41 to 33 for next to nothing, and the fact that Will Levis was available at 33 to begin with, I think is fantastic value. I used this example in an older video where it's like, if you said the Giants got Daniel Jones at 36, I think that pick would be widely considered a good selection versus Daniel Jones at 6. DeWayne Haskins, maybe 15 versus 45. That's another example. Mac Jones, I think that's already a pick that I don't hate. But if you get him at 45, it's like, wow, that's extreme value. And I think the same is true here for Will Levis. All right, the other quarterback to talk about is Hendon Hooker. I thought he should have been a second-round quarterback. I'm noted not as big of a Hendon Hooker guy. He was my QB6, but nevertheless, big arms, sneaky mobility, very accurate passer over the middle of the field, sees over the offensive line, delivers a lot of power throws. There's a lot to like about Hendon Hooker. It just comes down to, can he take his skill sets and leave a Josh Heupel offense, step into a different offense that maybe not as, offensive friendly and production friendly as Heupel's offense at the college level? Would he be fine with that? Well, one, him going to a Ben Johnson offense, I think, is a great start. But then two, he falls to the third round, and the Lions now set themselves up to, one, have a good backup behind Jared Goff in the event of an injury, or, I think at the worst, a continuation of the level of play we've seen from Goff, just at a much lower pay rate at somebody who's on a rookie contract at pick 68 versus the money that Goff makes. So I think this is some really, really good value, and it kind of capped off the fifth of, when I look at the Lions draft, I may not have been crazy about the first round and the value they got there, but when you look at the first 5 names that they accumulated through those first 5 picks, it's kind of hard not to like the Lions draft, and Hendon Hooker's a big reason why, because I think they got great value there at 68. All right, on to the running backs. DeWayne McBride, sorry, I am covering up his name. I'll move myself momentarily, but I think this guy could be a starter. So we'll talk more about him in the sleeper video. So I kind of teed it up a little bit. Sleepers, I think, are guys that from day 3 that may surprise you to become starters right away or starters within a year. And then the value here for McBride, a guy who was my RB6, I thought could have had an outside shot of being the 3rd running back off the board. One of the most productive running backs, both from a true production value, but also like PFF grades. And you look at what he did at UAB, it's hard to fathom why he fell to the 7th round. I'm still scratching my head as to why this guy who looks so good, only knock against McBride was that he played at UAB. And I'm sorry, that is not enough of a difference for me to take him from, being a 3rd, 4th round guy to a 7th rounder. So, I think this is an insane amount of value. And plus, when the Vikings draft running backs, I am listening. My ears are perked. It's kind of like the Steelers and wide receivers. There's a couple teams that scout certain position groups so well. And I think the running back position is that for Minnesota. Dalvin Cook looked like he kind of lost a step last year. If that continues this season, what does that mean? Madison, I believe this is his last year in Minnesota. So I could see by end of year where McBride's maybe the guy leading the way in rush attempts per game, especially if there's an injury to Cook or something like that. And certainly by year 2 of his rookie contract, I'd be willing to put money that he is the starting back there in Minnesota. All right. Next guy to talk about is going to be Jalin Hyatt. So now we're on to the wide receivers. Only one running back to include today, but Jalin Hyatt, and then we're going to talk about the next guy who went with the next pick, and is also a Tennessee teammate. But, Hyatt, to me, I wasn't a very big Hyatt guy throughout this cycle, but a lot of that was talking about the rhetoric of him being a first rounder, and to me, I just could not hop on that hype train. I like the speed, and he's definitely got some big playability, but I think a limited route tree, slider frame, so I think there's still some things to overcome. But then when you get to the second round, it's like, okay, I think he's worth taking on as a project, and the one thing he's going to be good at, and then you can kind of develop it, and there's not as much pressure on him working out considering he's a second rounder. And I think that's even more true when you consider the fact he's taken in the third round, and the Giants have a lot of these slider-built wide receivers, and they have a couple guys who should be able to force, the defense to respect the over-the-top pass, someone like a Darius Slayton. But that being said, that it just hasn't been a big part of their offense. Is it Daniel Jones, or have they not been getting the right pieces in there? Well, we're going to find out, because Jalin Hyatt is definitely going to be a guy who's a specialist as a burner, and then hopefully they can develop more of his yak game, which I think he's okay at, but more of his route running and the route tree as a whole. And they're looking for a guy to be that number one volume guy, the guy to lead the way in target share. I don't know if Hyatt's that dude, but here at pick 73, it's certainly worth finding out if he can develop and become that guy. And like I said, next pick, we're going to talk about Cedric Tillman here. Man, I love this. Last year of Donovan Peoples-Jones rookie contract, and this signals to me, it's going to be Tillman and Cooper on the outside, plus Elijah Moore for at least, this season and the year beyond. And man, I just look back to 2021, and I really like what Tillman looked like there when he was, playing closer to 100%. But even at 2022, this guy really plays well along the sideline, knows how to screen his defenders, great at those box out, 50-50 kind of contested catch spots, good in the air. I think this guy has a lot of those prototypical X-receiver traits that you're looking for while actually being 6'3", 215, where, maybe a guy like Rashee Rice wants to play like that, but is a little bit smaller. So I think Tillman, especially if he's healthy, it could easily be that number 2 target behind Amari Cooper and give them a really well-rounded trio. Tillman as the X, Cooper does a little bit of everything, and then Elijah Moore, who's a nice yak weapon, but also someone who can force the issue over the top. All right, next wide receiver, and again, I'll move myself, Parker Washington. The tough part here is I love the value. To me, he was a top 50 player on my board. I'm a big Parker Washington guy. I think there's not really a weakness in his game, which is also why I'm a little befuddled to why he went in the 6th round. But that being said, where I'm a little concerned about this is the last 2 years, Christian Kirk has been a 1,000-yard receiver. Had good touchdown production as well, and 85-plus targets or receptions, over each last 2 years. And that's with him predominantly playing out of the slot. Now, could he move back out wide like he did early career in Arizona? Sure. And then maybe that opens up a spot for Parker Washington to man the slot. But with Kirk playing so much better out of the slot, I just have a hard time thinking they're going to ask him to do that. And instead, they're going to just try to find an option there outside. So I think Parker Washington slot only. So he may be the odd man out. But nevertheless, based off where he was on my board and then where he goes at pick 185, that's insane. And maybe he's a guy that back half his rookie contract, he just works his way on the field because he's that good in practice, or becomes a commodity that balls out in the preseason, a team that's like, damn, we need a slot wide receiver. What's it going to cost to go get Washington? Well, they drafted him for a 6th. We'll give you a 6th. And then maybe he gets himself into a different situation where he can actually step into a starting role. But I'm a big fan of Parker Washington. Again, I really don't see a whole lot of weaknesses in his game, and it's still kind of a little surprising to me why he fell so far. All right, then we're on to the tight ends, and, damn it, why did I move myself? Darnell Washington. This one's kind of a dub one. Like, I don't think anybody expected him to fall this far, even if you're not a big Darnell Washington guy. Like, let's say you covet, receiving ability most out of tight ends, which, everybody has their own preferences there. Even if that was true, with how good of a blocker Darnell Washington is, I think you'd be surprised that he went 93. And part of it's also the knee injury popping up during the medical checks, but nonetheless, as long as that checks out and he is healthy, this is the best blocking tight end I've seen and I've scouted throughout my short time of doing this. But also a freaky athlete at 6'7", 265. Not often we see guys like that who go to a Power 5 school and have a national title under their belt fall this far either. So yeah, really intriguing prospect for the Steelers, and he's probably tight end 2 and probably limited in regards to what his receiving production is going to be because they'll ask Pat Freiermuth to do that. But blocking ability alone for an offensive line that needs help, this is an extreme value here. So then next up, we get to Andrew Vorhees. I know Vorhees lost a lot of steam after he tore his ACL at the Combine, but I feel like that's a little overblown. We just saw the Ravens draft another guy who did the exact same thing a year ago, David Ojabo. He went in the 2nd round. Now, edge versus, 5-year guard. I understand. I get it. But that being said, Andrew Vorhees is a great fit for that blocking scheme. Last year with Kevin Zeitler under contract, Ben Cleveland actually played right guard for the little bit of time that he was on the field last year. 2 years ago, he had almost 400 snaps at left guard. So I really do think Ben Cleveland can switch over to right guard post Kevin Zeitler. And then Andrew Vorhees becomes a plug-and-play starter at left guard. And not just a plug-and-play starter, I think a damn good one. We looked really, really good at USC. Was even better in 21 than he was in 2022. I think a good gap scheme guy and a really polished pass protector. I mean, I don't really know why he fell to the 7th round other than the fact that he just recently tore his ACL. But it does sound like his timeline is going to be having him ready by late fall into the winter. So he could be available midway through his rookie season. So yeah, again, I'm really surprised that he fell this far. But I think the Ravens just drafted our future starter there on the interior offensive line. And then Oluwatimi, or shorter, Oluwatimi. It's funny that it's the same thing back to back. But anyways, I mean, the Seahawks drafted their starting center in the 5th round. I mean, this was the one problem spot that was still kind of there on their offensive line. And I think they drafted a plug-and-play guy, a reliable starter at Michigan. His movement skills kind of, maybe it's just based on the games and the competition that he's playing. But sometimes he gets to the spot and sometimes he doesn't. So maybe it's worth me revisiting and kind of evaluating those plays where it felt like he got there and it's like, okay, well, who's he playing against? Maybe he's just beating a weaker team to the spot versus better competition. He's not as good of a mover, and that's put on display. But I still think he's a good fit for that zone blocking scheme. Maybe not be Joe Tippmann. He may not be John Michael Schmitz as a mover, but I still think that's a strength in his profile. Maybe not the biggest, but that on top of what we got to see, and he's polished and pass pro and a mover of people in the run game. Again, this is a starter in the 5th round. I mean, there's not much more you can ask for. And for the Seahawks to kind of finish off their O-line and get this type of value, all the credit in the world to John Schneider and Crow. Then we get Luke Wypler going to the Browns. This is kind of the same story, And I guess Oluwatimi to me is center only, and Wypler is as well. So maybe that's why these guys fell. John Gaines, guard center flexibility, he goes earlier. Joe Tippmann, same thing, he goes earlier. Drew Scruggs, guard center flexibility, he goes in the 2nd round. So it's like maybe that was the big deterrent here for why Wypler fell so far and why Shagun fell. Olusegun fell to the 5th round. But, Oluwatimi and Wypler to me were guys who Wypler should have been a 2nd rounder, and Oluwatimi to me was, late 3, early 4 in my books and with how I graded them. So for the Browns to draft a guy that's going to easily step into Ethan Posich's, current starting spot in a year's time, this is unbelievable value. He's a great zone blocking center. That's what Ohio State does. He stays in state and steps into a very similar blocking assignment with the Cleveland Browns. And, Posich just had a little bit of a career renaissance in Cleveland last year, and then hopefully that continues into this season. But now I think they got the guy to kind of take over, be a cheap starter. Rookie contract at pick 190 is dirt cheap. And he's going to be able to do a lot of those same things. But he's going to have to do it as a center only, which I don't think Cleveland's worried about whatsoever. So, yeah, in the 6th round, they drafted their future starting center, which is a big part of that, zone blocking scheme and what they need on that O-line. And the Browns' offensive line in general is one of maybe the biggest strength of that roster. You can make an argument. So to keep it that strength of strength is big. All right, next up, we're going to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Adetomiwa Adebawore. This one's kind of an easy one. A lot of people were surprised he made it to day 3. So for him to be at worst, a rotational D tackle there with Grover Stewart. Maybe Stewart gets the rundown work. Adebawore kicks inside and does the the pass down stuff and partners up with DeForest Buckner, gives you a nice 1-2 punch as a pass rush duo in the middle of that defensive line. All that makes sense. Maybe they'll explore what he could do at edge too. It's still a spot they're trying to get better. I know they signed Simpson Ibukam and they got year 3 of Kwity Paye loading, but we'll see what those guys do this year. And still, Adebawore could just be a DPR, pass rush specialist. And, Kwity Paye has been a better run defender than pass rusher, so maybe that's your rotation there. But yeah, the value here is just phenomenal for a guy who, had he been classified as a D tackle, would have ran the best in a record-setting IDL 40 at 4.49, has the arm length. You see the explosiveness on tape. Again, this was a weird one to see him fall to day 3, and I guess it's just because where Wypler, it's like he's a center only, Oluwatimi center only. Adebawore is a tweener, and it's kind of the same issue, but just in a different end of the spectrum where it's like those guys can only play one position, and, I want guys with flexibility. Here with Adebawore, he gives you that flexibility. Maybe he can play some edge, maybe he can play some IDL, but sometimes it feels like those defensive line tweeners, they get knocked down the board a little bit, and I think that benefited the Colts, who had one of the best drafts of this draft cycle. Then we get to Moro Ojomo going to the Eagles, one of my guys in the NFL draft. I loved Ojomo, had great production, great tape at Texas, both as a run defender where I think he really excelled, but I also think he had some nice pass rush ability he put on display. And then the problem here is going to be like, the Eagles drafted at 240 picks before this, Jalen Carter, and it's going to be Carter, and it's going to be Jordan Davis leading the way, and they still got Fletcher Cox for one more year, and they still got Milton Williams in the building. But maybe by the back half of Ojomo's rookie contract, he becomes a guy that's getting some early down work and, working in that rotation with Carter and Davis, who, had a deep rotation to work in at Georgia. Both those guys had concerns about their conditioning. So maybe Ojomo doesn't have the biggest role. He's not playing 800 snaps or 900 snaps a year, but could be a really solid 400 to 500 snap rotational player. And I think he'll be stout against the run. And I am hopeful that his pass rush production translates to the next level, but Big 12 defender, sometimes those come and go in regards to the pass rush production. But I do believe in him as a run defender. So, in 2 years' time, I think he'll have a role with the Eagles. But here at 249, at worst, if he's just early down run defender, that's insane value here for a guy that, to me, should have gone way before this. So, I'm scratching my head as to why Ojomo fell so much, and leave it to the Eagles in their A-plus draft to scoop up that value. Chargers, Daiyan Henley. Yeah, this is kind of a steal of a pick because, this guy is an insane coverage specialist, is now going to a zone-heavy defense where they're going to be like, hey, Daiyan Henley, cover the middle of the field. Ready, set, go. And that's putting him in a defense where you're playing to his strengths. Do I worry about what this team's going to look like in run defense? Kenneth Murray's more of a pass rush specialist, a blitzing linebacker. Eric Kendricks is solid against the run, but has lost a step. And then Henley can get blocked out of place. Sure, that's a concern. But as long as the team's in a third and long passing situation, Henley's going to make it tough to throw over the middle of the field. So this is taking a guy and his exact calling card to his game and putting him in a defense that's going to amplify that and allow that defense to get that much better, because they really haven't had a coverage specialist like Henley since Brandon Staley's got there. So absolutely love that fit, and I love the value there, getting him in the third round. And then a couple picks later, we get Trenton Simpson going to Baltimore. And, if you count Roquan Smith, the second round pick the Ravens used, they basically used both their day 2 picks to revamp that linebacker room, and already got the rumblings of Patrick Queen being out, which makes a lot of sense. And if Simpson is your Patrick Queen replacement, I'm here for it. Has a lot of those same athletic traits, but I also think plays a little less like his hair's on fire versus Patrick Queen, who's just kind of flying around trying to make plays. I think Simpson, you can even kind of move him to the nickel. I know they got Kyle Hamilton there, but Simpson, I think, comes with a little bit more versatility, and while you can also do some of the same stuff that you did with Patrick Queen, where they used Queen as a blitzer, and that was where some of his best plays came from. Trenton Simpson's got some decent pass rush, moves, and he's been utilized okay as a blitzer at Clemson. So they can still do a lot of that stuff, while I also think they just get a much better coverage player, and a guy that can move around the field a little bit more than they could with Patrick Queen. So with their third rounder, they just got a better upgraded version of Patrick Queen, which that's awesome, and that makes that defense that much better. And then we get Kelee Ringo, another Eagles player here, another obvious one. As Ringo, a lot of people, even if you didn't see him as a first rounder, people were like, hey, he'll come off the board by the end of the second. He ends up making it all the way to the fifth, which is banana land. And now he gets to go to a defense where, change in philosophy for sure, post Jonathan Gannon now, but there's no pressure for Ringo to get on the field. Because not only is it James Bradberry, Darius Slay back, it's Zach McPherson, who I know they like, mid-round pick last year. Greedy Williams, who I think was a sneaky under-the-radar one-year deal. And in the event one of those two older guys, Bradberry or Slay, gets hurt, I wouldn't be surprised if Greedy Williams steps in and plays some good football. So Ringo is just kind of chilling in the wings. He is just hanging out and getting to learn from, 4 guys ahead of him, and, 2 of those guys who are the starters, Bradberry and Slay, who are 2 of the best in the biz. So I think it's a great spot for him to kind of sit, learn, develop. He's still got all of his Georgia buddies there, and maybe by the back half of his rookie contract becomes a guy who starts to see the field. So yeah, insane value. This is kind of one of those ones that we've all kind of talked about as an absolute steal for Philadelphia. And then Darius Rush, similar but different here. I love what the Colts did in general. We already talked about Adebawore, and I tried to limit this to one person per team, but some teams drafted really well, and they got multiple guys on here. But it's also Julius Brent, it's Darius Rush, it's even Jalen Jones, who I think makes for an awesome projection as a cover 3 corner. So they maybe have a few too many guys now, but I think that's a great problem to have if you're Indy. I think Darius Rush, while I thought of him more as a man coverage specialist. At the same time, 4.35, 33-inch arms, and his movement skill. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Throw him in a cover 3 defense, let him play a lane, and let's see what it looks like. So I'm fascinated to see what they do with Kenny Moore and Isaiah Rodgers, some of those existing pieces, and where maybe they get moved to another team or also moved on the field. Maybe Rodgers moves inside if they do part ways with Kenny Moore, possibly. And that allows you to get Darius Rush, Brents, and Jones on the field, but also like Rush and Jalen Jones are day 3 picks, so no real rush to, for lack of a better phrase, rush them onto the field. But that being said, man, I just think this is a guy that should have gone 3rd round, like easily somewhere there in the 3rd round. I can't believe he fell this far. He looked great at the Senior Bowl, which is normally a big check, a big box to check for me and NFL teams. And you got Jim Nagy, kind of waving the flag of Darius Rush, trying to get, boosting him upwards, and he still falls. And I think the Colts, while, maybe the scheme fit's not perfect, prefer him to go to like a Baltimore, Minnesota, those man-heavy teams. But that being said, the traits are there, the length's there, the frame is there. Let's see what it looks like in Indy. And I think the process is really, really sound, getting him at 138. All right, then we get Tre Tomlinson. Man, another guy that I was surprised fell. And then Clark Phillips is another one to kind of shout out here. These nickel-onlys, that to me, Tomlinson's nickel-only despite playing on the outside. And same thing with Clark Phillips, just because of their size and their arm length. But that being said, I felt like the NFL was really hating on those guys. Even Brian Branch fell to the 2nd round. Antonio Johnson falls to the 5th round. We'll talk about him later on. Both those guys actually later on. And it's like, just because somebody plays on the slide, it feels like the NFL still got this bias. And it's like, these guys are going to be on the field 65 to 75% of the time. What's going on here? And Tomlinson was really great at TCU, playing on the outside. It was scrappy, maybe had some penalty issues, but I think that's, I think that can be corrected. And right now, the Rams really have nobody on the outside, whether it's outside corner or slot. They really don't have any starting corners locked in right now. And I think Tre Tomlinson, at the worst, is their starting nickel corner. And in that cover 4 heavy defense, I think if he does play on the outside, the Rams are a defense where they've been able to kind of overcome that. Did that with Darius Williams. They've done it with Troy Hill. So maybe Tomlinson can't play outside. To me, he's going to be a slot only, but still, nonetheless, that's a huge upgrade there for the Rams. And they get him in the 6th round. I don't know what the NFL's bias against those slot onlys was. And then we get Brian Branch. So same sort of deal here. Top 10 player on my big board. There was not a player drafted on day 2 that to me had a bigger difference, or literally did not have a bigger difference between my big board and where their actual draft selection was. So yeah, I think the Lions at the worst have their Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement. But I think CJ Gardner-Johnson, just like he did with Philadelphia last year, is going to play a lot more strong safety. And then Brian Branch is going to be their starting nickel, and they're going to have Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley on the outside. I think that's going to be their plan moving into week 1. We'll see once we get into training camp and preseason. But I think they drafted a starter in the 2nd round and a guy that is a sure tackler, great in both man and zone. You can blitz. There's not much you can't ask Brian Branch to do. And I think he plays faster than 4.58. So absolute steal here for the Lions. And this was the point in their draft where I was like, okay, hold on. Yeah, round 1 wasn't what I thought they would do, but those first 5 picks, like I said with Hendon Hooker, it's like if you just change the order a little bit, this is actually a really solid draft the Lions have been able to put together. And then we get to Antonio Johnson. So again, I don't know what the bias was against these nickel safety types or nickel corners in general. And maybe Antonio Johnson, I can understand, comes from a zone-heavy defense at A&M, and how much is that going to translate to the NFL level? Sure, I can understand, but he's 6'2", he's 200 pounds, that's freaky arm length. Whether he's playing the nickel or strong safety, I think he can work himself on the field for the Jags because those are, to me, the weakest spots of their defensive side of the ball. Like Rayshawn Jenkins, yeah, he had some big plays last year, but I'm not a big Rayshawn Jenkins believer. Trey Herndon, I think, is right now their starting nickel corner. They can definitely get better there. So I think Antonio Johnson drafted in the 5th round. I was floored by that. I was saying, hey, Jacksonville should take him in the 2nd round. Then we get to Jacksonville in the 3rd. And I'm like, hey, they should take Antonio Johnson. And then they end up getting him in the 5th round. Back-to-back picks, Antonio Johnson, Parker Washington. I like a lot of what the Jags did on day 3, where I'm a little hesitant to where Parker Washington fits in the mix because Christian Kirk's going to play in the slot. I really have no reservations about Antonio Johnson finding the field because I think he can develop into someone who's better than Rayshawn Jenkins, and I think he can develop into someone better than Trey Herndon. So, yeah, love the value they got there. And then Anthony Johnson Jr., a 7th-round pick, was one of the top 10 safeties in this class for me. Granted, a weak safety class, and again, a nickel corner, but man, I think this could be an easy Rasul Douglas replacement, potentially right away, but certainly next year when you can cut Douglas and save close to $10 million against the cap. I think he's going to plug and play, become that nickel corner with Stokes and Jair Alexander on the outside. So I think the Packers drafted a potential immediate starter, but certainly a long-term starter. And again, they did it in the 7th round. And the other thing about Anthony Johnson, where it's like, even if the league does have a bias against nickel corners, this one doesn't make sense because at Iowa State, he started his career on the outside and then shifted to play some safety and nickel corner. Like, to me, this is a guy that you can make an argument that, hey, we get into a pinch, this guy can slide out wide and play some outside corner for us and we'll be okay. Like, this guy could play potentially all 5 positions in the secondary. Maybe it's just me that I prioritize that versatility and flexibility a little bit more than the NFL teams. But to me, this was a baffling fall for Anthony Johnson. Now, he wasn't a name that was super hot throughout the process. Maybe a little bit later on started to garner some steam. But 7th round, to me, that was way, way too low for Johnson to fall. And then that brings us then back to Will Levis. So that is going to do it for my video on the top 20 steals of the 2023 NFL Draft. Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who are the biggest steals, maybe from your favorite team, but also across the entire NFL? I'd love to hear some of your favorite picks for biggest steals of the NFL Draft. And maybe you can even tie it into who you think some sleepers are. Some guys that got drafted on day 3 that will eventually step into starting roles maybe as early as this year for their respective squad. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Be sure to hit that like button if you did, and subscribe if you're new to the channel looking for more football content in your life. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.